All right, so welcome to the Understanding Your Brain webinar. So there's a lot of information we're going to be tackling in this 30-minute webinar today. At the end of this time, I'm going to share about a 8-week class that you can join if you find this helpful. This is just a tiny little sample of some of the things we're going to be teaching called Coaching in the Brain. And that class is actually going to talk about 4 things: brain basics, which is an overview of the brain and how each region works, unlocking emotional intelligence, exploring the why behind actions, reactions, to people, circumstances, which can be so helpful with work teams and church committees or your own family. We'll talk about limiting beliefs and how to just manage all of those different things. We also will introduce a personal performance plan that each person who's part of the class can use to create their own personal performance plan, as well as to use with your coaching clients as well. And then the last thing in that class, the class will do is a coaching model. So we're going to explore how the coaching process integrates with brain science and how you can use that connectivity to neuroscience as you have a coaching framework and process. So it helps them then to impact people's mindsets, patterns of thinking, in order to live with greater effectiveness. But for now, we're going to jump in and talk about today's agenda, which is what's behind the overwhelmed feeling, how to tame it, the myth of multitasking and why it actually undermines productivity and success, how to deal with fear, anxiousness, and keep them from undermining performance, and then lastly, how to have greater focus, avoid distractions, and be more productive when working on projects. And so the rationale behind it is, if we understand how God designed us to operate and align ourselves with this design, then we're going to experience greater productivity, success, and peace in our life, which is going to help us then obviously to be more effective. So the first question, what is behind the overwhelm? So, and this idea of how to tame it. So when we get started, one of the things we want to do is it starts with understanding your brain, and particularly the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex, if you think about that's the brain region, if you give a definition, implicated in planning complex cognitive behavior, personality expression, decision-making, and moderating social behavior. So that's the prefrontal cortex. It's the biological seat of your conscious interactions with the world. It's what allows you then to think through things and set goals, make plans, and evaluate decisions. So this is the part of the brain that holds thoughts that are not necessarily generated from external sources. And the way that it fits with overwhelm is that if you think about your brain as a stage, or I'm sorry, your prefrontal cortex as a stage, it's this thought that every thought is like an actor on the stage. So your prefrontal cortex is a stage, the thoughts are actors. And they show up, they jump on the stage, and they come off the stage. And so as you think about how many things you're dealing with, you start to realize, okay, if I got too many actors on the stage. Hey, Maggie, thank you for muting. If I have too many actors on the stage, then I'm going to get overload. So different thoughts and things jumping on the stage, off the stage, and we as the director, we have to create a strong director to know what should be getting on the stage and not. So thinking about this question about multitasking then. So if you realize there's only so much room on the stage and there's only so many things you can be concentrating on, then we come up with this idea of the myth of multitasking. And probably all of you have heard about multitasking, and you hear about, oh yeah, multitasking, you can do it, and how that looks and supposed to look for you. But realistically, this whole thing about multitasking is that it's really undermines your productivity and your success. So when we try to multitask, essentially what we're trying to do is put multiple things and have our prefrontal cortex focusing on these multiple things at once. And by doing that, it splits our ability to do either thing efficiently. And so what we end up doing is we end up overloading the stage by putting too much on it. And also, one of the things that happens is we think about this idea of memory loss. Sometimes if you're trying to work on multiple things at once, you can actually forget some key pieces of things that you were working on. You end up actually not remembering something you wanted to remember, and being just totally not contributing to success by trying to put too many things on your stage. It definitely accelerates your mental, the drain on your mental energy. So one of the things also about the prefrontal cortex is it has a limited amount of energy each day. And you can't just stop and say, okay, let me fill her up again, or it's unlimited. You have to do things to try to get your prefrontal cortex to get re-energized again. And so by trying to multitask, you actually accelerate the energy loss. So you start to, it obviously requires a lot of concentration to do that, and causes productivity then to definitely drop off and take a hit. A couple of simple ways to restore mental energy, and you probably all have realized this, is taking a nap will help refresh mental energy. And there's certain foods that you could do as well. And so multitasking is definitely a myth in that way. I'd like to just pause real quick and just ask folks who are here, if you wouldn't mind, just come off of mute real fast and just share, what have you noticed as far as multitasking for yourself? What has that been like for you, and what's your experience been?
Michael, one thing I was going to mention too is, I don't know if you've read this, but Dr. Carolyn Leaf, who's a neurocognitive scientist, she actually says that she refers to it as milkshake multitasking. And she said it actually does brain damage when we try to think about too many things.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that you just talked about taking a nap, because I took one a little earlier and I feel a lot more refreshed. And I think the other thing too is when you're overwhelmed with things around you, that certainly does kind of create that sense of overwhelm.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Who else? Thanks, Tom.
Michael, it also takes me a lot longer to get back on track.
It does. Yeah, it does. Rhonda, Carrie, what have you experienced if you noticed this with multitasking?
I think one of the things you said about that resonated with me personally was, if you're multitasking, you're really not focused individually on what you're actually working towards, and you're kind of giving it a little bit here and a little bit there, and not your sole attention. So it's what you're trying to accomplish by doing too much, by trying to get too much done, you're actually doing it kind of half. You're not doing your full best work. So that resonated well.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
That's pretty much what I was going to say is I can do multiple things at one time, but they're not things that I need to have brain power for.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's just robotic stuff. I can do multiple things and do that. But if I really need to pay attention, I can't do but one thing.
All right. Yeah, exactly. Especially something that you're really familiar with, and
yes.
It's not a new thing for you. All right, thanks. So yeah, that multitasking is definitely a myth. So let's talk about emotions and thinking about dealing with things like fear, anxiousness, and what goes on there. So, of course, there's a lot of this going on in the world today, and we all deal with fear and anxious thoughts. In fact, the Bible actually has that phrase "fear not" in it, and I've heard this. I didn't count them up myself, but "fear not" in the Bible 365 times. So almost like one for every day of the year. So these emotions, of course, are triggered by a part of the brain called the limbic system. So we talked about the prefrontal cortex, like a stage, and that's where your conscious thinking and where you're trying to work on projects and where you're trying to concentrate and get things done. That's where that's going on. And then the emotional place is this limbic system. And it's what's going on as far as creating the perception of whatever feeling you feel, whether it is fear or a joy or excitement or anticipation or anxiousness. So whatever is going on there. The primary purpose of the limbic system is to keep us safe. And so when our brain senses danger, we go into that, as you all know, that fight or flight or freeze response automatically. It's something that just happens to us. It shows up. Sometimes it's really obvious that it's a good thing. So if for some reason, a car's coming at you, or, something that seems clearly, hey, this is not good, it's good to have that fight, flight, freeze response. And sometimes, interesting thing is that people can actually feel this response when they have been slighted by another person. So imagine you're in a meeting and you're with some people and all of a sudden you feel slighted. So if that happens to you, that also creates a response in your limbic system. And so you want to be aware of that. So understanding the role of the limbic system. So thinking about this, so we're going to look at what happens here. The limbic system, one of the things that it's constantly doing is it's scanning, and then you see this illustration here. You notice that it connects with all of the other parts of the brain. So your prefrontal cortex is in the front, as we talked about, and the limbic system is actually touching all of the other parts of the brain. And one of the things, there's a quote by this guy, Evian Gordon. He says, everything you do in life is based on your brain's determination to minimize danger, maximize reward. So it's constantly scanning and it's trying to determine, is this thing going to minimize danger, or is it going to give me a reward? So in some sense, it's a very primal kind of thing, and it's developed to keep us safe and to also bring rewards to us. But you'll notice there's this decision that your limbic system is making, about dealing with a threat, about how to move towards it or away from it, and then a reward, we want to move toward it. So there's this toward or away response that we have as we examine and evaluate things. So I don't know how you all feel about a puppy or a kitten, but typically when people see kittens or puppies, what kind of response do you have? It's usually a happy response, a towards response. Oh, that is so nice. Conversely, most people, maybe not you, but most people, if they see a spider or a snake, might have a away response. They might feel threatened. And so there's this different responses that we have. And that's the purpose of the limbic system. That's what it's doing. And so the the thing that's going on here then is, all right, so how does this fit with emotional intelligence? How does it fit with fear as we're talking about it? So 3 ways to deal with fear. So thinking that you're going to have this fearful response. First thing is you want to name it. So here's something you can do is just name it out loud. Oh, I'm afraid of that, whatever that is, whatever it's something that's a situation, a circumstance, a belief, a spider, a snake, whatever it is. So you name it out loud. There's something that happens to us when we actually start to speak and say whatever it is going on to us. It has an effect that it takes it out of just the subconscious and the anxious level, and it brings it out into a place where we can, oh, okay, yeah, that's what's going on. It's a sense of acknowledgement and acknowledging what you're feeling, which is a huge thing anytime you're dealing with any kind of a feeling or a response that's going on. A second thing you can do is try to reframe it. So don't try to suppress it, and instead try reframing the situation. And something you can do with that is just look at it in a different light. So an example of this is, okay, I don't need to go near that thing, or I don't need to go towards that object, or I have an alternative. What happens is we get sometimes stuck in that first thought or first emotion, and then we have trouble trying to reframe because our emotions are so strong and because what we're feeling is so strong. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to practice and learn how to manage our feelings, naming it out loud and then reframing it and seeing it in a different light. And so that can be some simple things to some big things. I don't know how many times we're talking about social, being slighted socially or whatever, where there's a story that we might tell ourselves about a situation or a person or a circumstance. So there may be a circumstance and like, oh, this is terrible, or this is whatever. Probably one of the things with the COVID-19 pandemic is there's a lot of fear, anxiety, whatever around it. And so it's good to acknowledge it and then think of how to reframe it. What's happened that's been good? How have you grown? What have you learned? How can you develop? Whatever. So there's ways to reframe situations and then do something with it to make it a different perspective. So just, so that again, that acknowledging the emotion, it loses power and it allows you then to have a different outcome from it. So I'd be curious, just open it up for some more feedback here. So let's see who we got. So, hey, Eric, thanks for joining. So anybody have an example? I'd love to hear just 1 or 2 where you've had an experience where you've had a emotional response about something, again, a situation, a circumstance, maybe it was a relational thing. And what did you do about it? How did you handle that? And if it wasn't well, that's fine. What would you be able to do differently next time? So who would like to share? Let's get a couple of folks. Anybody have a situation, circumstance, how you had to deal with some fear?
I got one, Michael. It's a kind of a past tense story. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
When I was meeting with my counselor some time ago, and I was telling her about a time when my parents, they were immigrants from India, and they were used to growing up with a lot of adults. The ratios were crazy, like 20 adults to 1 child. And when they came here, they had no relatives. So they did things kind of unconventionally. They did the best they could. But one memory that was always really hard for me to process was my dad would leave me at this one tennis court. He was, a really great tennis player. And he wanted to live vicariously through me and my brother, and he wanted us to become pros. So he took us out, sucked the joy out of tennis forever, but took us out for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours every day after school. And then from there, we would have to go to tennis lessons 2 times a week on average. And sometimes, this is in New York City, he had to leave me at one tennis court after we warmed up for an hour and a half for his colleague to come from the hospital in downtown New York City to pick me up at this tennis court in the suburbs, and then take me to this other tennis court on the other side of town, on the other side of the island, actually, for a tennis lesson. And this went on for years. From the time I was 6 years old till about 9, I was left alone. And sometimes, depending on traffic, I was there by myself for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half.
Wow.
So
Wow.
when I thought back on that, I thought that was so neglectful. It was so scary. And there were all these big teenagers by the water fountain, and they were always hanging out by the water fountain in the restroom. So I couldn't use the restroom. I couldn't get a drink of water. I was so scared and alone. Well, in this counseling session recently, I'm sorry this is so long, but it's a great story. We prayed through this memory, and the Lord showed me that the guys in big leather jackets, they seemed really tall and just scary looking to me, but they were my angels. They were watching over me. And the whole thing kind of shifted, not just that one memory, but my entire childhood. It felt like the Lord reframed and saw and showed me how he was with me through it all.
Yeah, that's a real, boy, that hits all the things, reframing it, naming it, and dealing with that. Thank you, Carthy. Yeah, my goodness. Talk about turning a situation around. So we'll just for the sake of time, we'll stop with that one, but that was great. Great example. All right, so dealing with fear and emotion. So I want to again mention the coaching in the brain class I mentioned at the beginning, and looks like we had somebody else join. So this is going to be, as I said, an 8-week class. We're actually going to start October 4th at 6 p.m. in the evening, lasts for an hour, 8 weeks. Coaching in the brain, we're going to, we've barely scratched the surface on some of these brain basics. And so we're going to look at a number of areas of the brain, how each region functions, what does it do, how they interact with each other, and then really dive into this emotional intelligence more and talk about not just how to deal with fear, but also what about your different beliefs and mindsets, as well as just the interactions with other people, how to deal with and still be productive even with those emotions going on. We're going to talk about and help you create a personal performance plan. I have a whole template and process for that, which you can use, and then you can take that into any coaching work you do. And then a coaching model where we explore and customize a coaching process that incorporates the brain science for coaching individuals to help them develop a mindset with greater effectiveness in their life, their school, their work, their relationships, whatever that is. And so you will benefit from it, and your coaching clients will. Now, I'll say this, this class, because you're here normally, it's $319 to be a part of the class. It's really revolutionary. I can't say more about it, and I'll send information afterwards. Some great testimonials, people who've been in it, how life-changing it is for them. I've had several people come back and take it again, send family members, that kind of thing. But instead of $319, I'm offering it for $199 if paid in full by September 21st. And so I'll be sending out the link and the information. You can read more about all this. And it can qualify for 8 hours of ICF continuous education training. So it's not core competencies training, but it is continuous education training. So if you want to know more about it, I'll send it in my email. You all know me, obviously, at this point, Mike at crosswayslifecoaching.com, and we'll we'll be able to send you that information as a follow-up to this webinar. All right. Last thing we want to talk about is how to have better focus, avoid distractions, be more productive when working on projects. I think distraction and loss of focus is one of the biggest issues that I hear people talk about. It's pretty huge and it's a big performance underminer. So a major part of major key to peak performance is being able to stay focused and avoid distractions. And so one of the things as you think about this is there's a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. There's actually a part of your brain that is responsible for helping you to notice and detect new and novel things. So at the beginning, we said the prefrontal cortex, its role is like a stage where you have ideas to get on and off, where you work on things. The anterior cingulate cortex is actually there to detect new or novel things, and it lights up when you notice something that's not what you expected. And this is exactly what advertisers and marketing people use to appeal to you and to get you to stop and pay attention to the product or service that they're trying to sell or market. So advertisers are using your own brain to try to get your attention and your interest. And so as you think about this, this idea, watch out for the shiny bouncing object. So, oh, look at this, and oh, look at that. And let me click here and there and whatever else comes across your path. So to deal with distraction, some of the things you can do is first create a distraction-free zone. So if you need to be focused and you need to get something done, try to get everything that could potentially distract you out of the way. So I know people who have created a separate workspace where they have just a blank wall they stare at. They turn off all the bells and whistles and ringing and the cell phone and the messages that come in with email, just to be able to create this distraction-free zone. So that's pretty huge, because if you can create a place and space where you can just be focused and not distracted, you're going to be a lot more productive than somebody who's getting and finding those distractions coming at them. Another thing is to mentally clear your stage as you move through daily activities. So I call this cleaning the brush in some ways. So as you move from activity to activity, take 5 minutes and just totally clear your mind, put whatever that was to the side. Okay, I'm moving on. Give yourself a chance to just refresh, maybe staring out the window, and maybe just listening to some calm music, whatever, but just clearing the brush, maybe go for a walk. Certainly walking, body movement is really great for this kind of thing. And it'll help to inhibit distractions and maintain your focus as you mentally clear the stage moving throughout your day. All right, so right at the bottom of the hour, as I said, it was a packed 30 minutes, but I really would love to encourage you to join this Coaching in the Brain class that we're going to be doing. You can find out more about this at my website, /brain coaching. Some great testimonials. It'll have all the details in there. And if you want that special price, you have to email me. I send you the link for that. And like I said, I'll send that out to you as part of the recording from today. There's this quote, and I think it is exactly right. What are some constraints, or I'm sorry, what are some constants we've seen about a coach's background very consistently over the years? About 95% of coaches have said a background in neuroscience moderately or positively affects credibility. However, only 10% of coaches say their training was based on neuroscience and or psychology. It's also become very clear a majority of professionals think coaches should have at least a working knowledge neuroscience, and 85% of respondents agree that neuroscience should have a role in coaching. So it's a thing that coaches want and found that, hey, this is really going to help me. People who work with coaches are somewhat expecting and desiring this as well. All right, so takeaways. We're going to stop sharing here. And I just want to open it up. First, thank you all for those who showed up and came in person. A whole bunch of people sign up for it. So I must have a number of folks who are going to listen to the recording, and I understand that. But I'd love to hear each person just share 20, 30 seconds, so really succinct. What's your takeaway from this? And love to hear what you're going to be able to do to perhaps do a +1, take it one step further. So Tom, would you start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I guess the thing that strikes me is that this is a really big, complex kind of concept. And, there's been a lot of talk about it over the years, both in terms of emotional intelligence, but it's also the brain science. And I think it really is advantageous to really have a better handle on it in order to be more effective in coaching. So
Absolutely.
this really seems to be an important thing.
Yeah, good, thank you. Eric Lee, I know you joined us late. Would you mind chiming in? What's one thing you learned or taken from it? And you're on mute, Eric. I don't know if you can hear us. Hopefully you can. All right, let's go on to Carrie. Carrie, you mind sharing?
No, not at all. One of the things that I took away was to create your distraction-free zone. That's something I have not done in my life, and I can see how that resonates. Here I am working from home. I've got 3 monitors in front of me, because it's all about productivity, right? So having that sacred space of just having some simplistic objects around you, like a desk and a table, right? A table and a pencil and a pen. That's all you need in life, right? So I think that was one of my key takeaways today, is just seeking out that distraction-free zone.
That's great. Very good. And Carthy?
I really appreciate what you said, Michael, about the number of times that fear was mentioned in the Bible. Do not fear, 365, one for every day.
Yeah. Yeah. God knows as well, doesn't he? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. And I do hope you'll really consider to join that Coaching in the Brain class. I feel like I'm patting myself on the back, but I can tell you based on other people's feedback, again, I'll send the link out. It is really life-changing for you and the folks you will coach and work with.
I'm excited to start that class.
Hey,
I had tried the link several times, and I appreciate you sending me the link again. It worked that time.
Good. Very good. Thanks.
It's going to be great.
All right, guys. Well, Lord bless, and we will see you hopefully in another meeting or in the class, or however God causes our paths to cross. All right.
Thanks,
take care.
Mike.
Yep.